Today I'm joined by Mark, Jess and Barty, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Thank you, Sumaya. I'm Mark Chandaram, Client Director in the Public Sector UK team, and I'm also a champion member for the Speak Freely pillar in the Ethnicity Employee Impact Group.
I'm Jess Chandy, Leadership and Development Consultant. Like Mark, also part of the Ethnicity EIG, and I work on the Education pillar.
I'm Barty Lim. I'm the NetSec Pre-Sales Security Consultant, and I'm involved with lots of different things. So wellbeing, I get involved with the ethnicity and the gender EIGs.
Thank you so much for joining me on our third podcast, which today we're going to be talking all about South Asian Heritage Month. Now, I'm going to put my hands up and admit, I don't really know much about South Asian Heritage Month, so who's going to kick us off and tell us all about it?
So South Asian Heritage Month, equivalent to Black History Month, really. So it's there to celebrate all things South Asian, the heritage that the people of Britain have with that particular region, which is much deeper than many would believe and goes back many decades, if not centuries. Lots of sort of public figures or pioneers that helped break boundaries in terms of migration and the type of work that our ancestors ultimately did, and covers 8 countries in total, which surprised us actually. We thought it would be much more wide-reaching. And those countries are Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And the theme for 2022 is there is a committee or a consortium of actually sort of public figures, celebrities that started this, is around celebrate, commemorate, and educate around all things South Asian.
Amazing. I have to admit, I did Google to see whether Iran was part of South Asia. How embarrassing is that? But it's fantastic. I mean, before I joined Computer Centre, I hadn't really heard of anything like that. I mean, obviously, going to school and growing up, we all heard of Black History Month, but that was about it. So why did it get started, and why are we doing it here at Computer Centre?
As part of the Ethnicity Employee Impact Group, which I like to think most, might be stretching, are familiar with or have heard of, we are constantly looking externally at what's going on, how is diversity in all its forms, my interest in particular is ethnicity, being celebrated, how's awareness being raised, etc., etc. And as part of that, earlier on this year, for example, for the first time, we celebrated Racial Equality Month, which, again, some people will recognise some of the social media posts and some of the activities that we did internally during that week. This is a month, so over 4 weeks, from the 18th of July to the 17th of August. And really came about, again, like I say, just looking at what's out there, how's it being promoted, much in the way of, as we've done in other areas like gender or mental health and wellness, and picked up on it. And the view was we have a significant community here that will share that heritage and background either completely or in part. So we wanted to engage with that community through the course of the month.
I think it's fantastic. It's absolutely amazing that we have such a diverse workforce as well, which I think compared to a lot of other organisations, we are very, very diverse. So bringing this into the forefront and having our EIGs to support that is absolutely amazing. But you touched on something there, Mark, about mental health and well-being. And obviously, as this is a sort of well-being podcast, I'm really interested in understanding what kind of upbringing you all had, because you all come from different parts of South Asia. So maybe explaining, did you have any form of mental health issues? What was it like growing up as a South Asian here in the UK?
So for me, I guess my dad moved over from India when he was like 3 or 4 years old, and his siblings are actually born here. So we're quite a Western family, and so we don't speak a lot of Gujarati because we're from India in Gujarat. But my mum came over when she was about 14, and her family are very traditional. So for us, it was like the torn between our very modern family to our very traditional family. And so there was that sort of struggle for me, I guess, that my dad understood the benefits of going to university and all of those things, but my mum wanted me to do all the things she expected, you know, get married and have kids, and my husband is the person who's the breadwinner, and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And my life didn't go that way. So I guess that was something I never realised was a struggle for me personally. You know, I was forever disappointing my mum because I wanted to be more westernised, because that's what my family is like. And I'm much closer to my dad's family. So I didn't marry an Indian, and I did go to university, and I moved in with my boyfriend, and I bought a house, and, you know, all the things you don't do. And none of my cousins on my mum's side did that. And I'm the eldest on my dad's. So there was a lot of pressure of what am I doing that's going to affect all of my family on my dad's side of the family. You know, I'm opening up doors to things that they might not want. And on my mum's side of the family, I'm my younger one of the grandchildren, and I went against everything that everybody else did. So there was a lot of struggles that I had to like come to terms with eventually, but I didn't realise the impact it all had until I went to counselling, and then suddenly realised that I'd been carrying all of that the whole time, and I always thought I was a disappointment because of the fact that I never did what my mum expected me to do. So yeah, so there's been some struggles.
Were you able to articulate that to your parents? Were you able to tell them what you were going through?
No, not really. I think my dad understood a bit better about the whole situation, but my mum just doesn't, and she doesn't know that, you know, that's how I feel, or I've just come to terms with it. I've just accepted that I'm never going to do those things that would make my mum happy, but I had to do what I had to do for myself, and I don't regret anything that I've done, but I know that my mum would have liked it to have been different, but I've come to terms with that now.
Amazing. Jess, I know we've spoken before, haven't we, where you said that you have a slightly different sort of upbringing and the way your life ended up to Bharti, and how was that?
Yeah, so when we were talking, we were comparing notes on you did everything the opposite, whereas I did everything by the book. So I fell in love with an Indian man, I married an Indian man, I never moved in with him until we got married. So all very traditional in that respect. The backdrop, so my parents came over when they were young, both from India, Punjab, got married when they were here. Me, my sisters and brothers were born here. I unfortunately lost my dad when he was quite young. He was 37, so I've actually outlived him right now. But when he passed away, I was convinced he suffered from depression. I think he had OCD, but OCD when I was growing up wasn't a thing. Like, I'd never really heard of it. And I don't know if one sort of perpetuated the other or what, but I think both were contributing factors to his ill health. He then was physically ill, and I don't think his mental health helped him get better or fight through that. Now, I don't scientifically know that. That's a feeling I have, having lived with what was going through at the time. He unfortunately passed away, and after he died, I sort of stepped in and was just dealing with life as you do as a 13-year-old, I suppose. And my school at the time asked my mum to take me to counselling. Now, I'd seen my dad go through, as I see, depression and OCD, and I thought, well, he never got help, so obviously I don't need help either, right? He's died, it's just another thing. You get very practical, I suppose. So when my mum brought that offer to me via my school, I was like, nah, ain't going to happen. Like, I'm not ill. I don't need help. What is this? And counselling, we never really talked about counselling in our family. Again, it wasn't a thing, but the answer was no, because I didn't think it was going to help me do anything. Roll on, I suppose, 20 years. I've had personal challenges. Me and my husband haven't, unfortunately, been able to have kids, and that led me to seek counselling. And oh my God, was it a revelation? Because the support I'd got from counselling, you know, there was a phrase she used, which is, you're grieving for loss. And I was like, well, no, don't be silly. I've not had a child that I've lost, so what am I grieving? And her view was, you've lost the hope of having a child, which is why you're feeling the way you are. And that for me opened massive floodgates. The loss of my dad, I never actually grieved for my dad because I went into just deal with it mode. I helping my mum, helping my sisters and brothers. My younger sister at the time was 7, so we range between 12 and 7. Young children, my mum's first language isn't English. She had to learn everything, so I was her support network. So in doing so, I was like, why did I not do this before? Why did no one tell me to go and get support before and counselling before? And I'm like, actually, hold on a minute. Someone did, but I rejected it. And I think I rejected it because it wasn't even a stigma. No one spoke about counselling. So it's one thing when you're dealing with a stigma because you try to go against that, you do something about it, you research into it. When it's an unspoken thing, you don't know what you're fighting, right? So I just knew that I'd never heard of this counselling thing before and I didn't want it. But actually going to get that support for me was something I'd gone, I wish we did talk about this. Wish somebody had said, God, it's not because you're ill or, you're incapable. It's because you just need someone to talk to. And by doing that, for me, now every time I go, I might be on the edge of losing it. I know I've got a support network. I know who I can reach out to. I know how to get myself back in balance. But to have gone through all of that as a child and only to get into adulthood, still with all that baggage to go, oh my God, there is help out there. I wish our culture did more promotion and more talking. And I always have to balance that with, we have a beautiful culture and I love it. There are so many amazing things. But if there's one thing I could go, God, we need to do more of, it's probably the promotion of mental health, of counselling, of the support network, and speaking up and speaking your mind because, oh my God, it makes you stronger.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing up the subject of stigma. And I think that's a really big thing for all of us in this room, where we've all suffered some form of stigma, whether it's to do with mental health, whether it's to do with our heritage background, whether it's to do with our religion. So there is stigma surrounding mental health. I know within the South Asian community, within the Persian community, within the Middle Eastern community. Have you felt that less now that you're older and you've been, you're understanding mental health a little bit more? Are you doing anything proactive within your communities maybe, or within your own families to destigmatize talking about mental health in any way at all?
So my family, so my dad's side of the family, and actually my mum's side of the family, are fully aware of my mental health journey. It's documented. It's obviously been documented for Computer Centre and our blogs. So there's lots out there that I've put out there, but I also have like a small business on the side of my day job, and I promote mental health in there. And it's been eye-opening that people have gone, oh, you're brown and you're Asian and you're telling us all about your mental health, and it's meant that they've gone and got help. And then because I donate to mental health charities as well as other charities, one of them was the Counselling Foundation, and they provide support to people who can't afford to pay for counselling. So you can get counselling for £5 a day, and it's all supported. And so I did a lot of promotion for that as well, to say like counselling is available. And counselling isn't just for mental health. It's for grief. It's for COVID. It's for absolutely everything, relationships, like that was part of my problem, with my mum. I didn't go to counselling for that because you think, well, it's just a thing, right? It's not, my mental health's not bad. And so I've done a lot of conversations around that it's not just about, my mental health was awful. But it isn't just about that. There are so many reasons. And I always say that COVID is one of these. People lost people. We couldn't attend funerals. The effect that has on you because you can't grieve and go through that process is huge. And we're just going to carry that with us. And then we continue. And so I do a lot of promotion for that. And it's funny because even though I'm promoting it, I can't see that many people promoting it. So there's a lady called the Brown Psychologist, and she does a lot. But there's actually still not that much. And it's quite scary because there's lots of famous people talking about mental health. And we touched on this last time, right? Famous people talk about mental health, but they're not like you. They're different. You need a normal person who you can relate to that's going, well, my mental health's not great. And I put up a post recently, and the amount of people that reached out and said, oh, actually, I'm feeling the same. And I need to get back into exercise. That'll help. Oh, go for a walk. I've been doing that. it's just, I think it's nice for other people to know that they're not alone and that somebody else is also going through it. So I do quite a lot, and my family are all fully aware. And I hope that if my cousins do ever get to the point where they need support, they know that it's not like a dirty word to go to counselling and get support or tell someone. So they won't make the same mistake that I did, where I just didn't tell anyone and just carried on and pretended it didn't exist.
I think it's so important that we start opening up that conversation, you know, at home with our children, with our younger relatives, with our older relatives, because it's then we're able to expand it to our workplaces, to social media, for example. And you've just mentioned, Barty, we've got so many famous people from, you know, ethnically diverse backgrounds who talk about mental health, but actually, where's the support? Having looked at our employee assistance program and what kind of counselling that they provide our workforce, is that counselling diverse enough? Is there someone for everyone? You know, does someone want to speak to a Muslim counsellor, for example, or someone from the same, you know, sort of background as them? So what you're doing, Barty, I've always said this is absolutely fantastic, and keep doing what you're doing, because if any of us stop, then we lose all the great work that we've put into getting to where we are right now. But you picked up on a point about relating. And Mark, I'd like to come to you and ask you about, because you come from a mixed background. So tell us a little bit about your background and how that's affected you growing up.
I'm Sri Lankan, English, Irish, so a bit of a mix. I went to school. Well, I'm the eldest of the cousins on my dad's side, where there's 14. That's the Sri Lankan side of the family. You probably guessed from the numbers, which means that, you know, I've got my brother and sister are younger than me, and then we've got quite a big gap then between my other cousins in terms of age. So my youngest cousin's actually the same age as my eldest son. That is quite a void, and that was a little bit of a surprise for us all. But it kind of meant that growing up, consciously or unconsciously, there was a role model element to for the family. Jess touched on it, Barty touched on it, in terms of how you're either following suit or not following suit. On my mum's side, I'm near the younger end of the scale. There's 8, maybe just shy of 8 cousins on that side of the family, the English-Irish side of the family. And I went to school with one of my English-Irish cousins. So you had myself as very visibly brown, and he as very visibly white, and quite different in our looks, not just from a skin colour perspective, but more broadly. And it was standard to have the response of, you can't be cousins. So I came quite hardened, I think, probably, to some of what we'd now call unconscious bias. People just couldn't believe it. Now, actually, you know, you look on TV, and I'm going to now make reference to a kids program, because I've got 2 children under the age of 6, so my morning television is generally children's shows. But there is a show about the environment and being green, the green weights, and that is a mixed race family. So it's much more visible now than it ever used to be. But I used to react a lot to that. Doing martial arts, often that could result in some form of physical reaction, which was just me processing or responding with how I knew how to deal with that situation, and that wasn't particularly managing my emotions. I think the other thing that stuck out, actually, that I only realised in 2020, and I was watching a documentary from Channel 4, I think it was, The School That Tried to Abolish Racism, which, if anyone's not watched, I would highly recommend it because it's very insightful. And when we were applying for something, whether it be a school, a job, or filling out some kind of form, and this is still relevant today, it asks you about nationality. And I would go to white Asian. And my mum always used to say, no, but you're British, because we were born here, both my parents were born here. It's my grandparents on the respective sides that were born either in Ireland or Sri Lanka. And we always used to joke, don't be racist, Mum. You're the biggest racist with brown kids. And all have a bit of a joke of it, apart from her. She wouldn't find it that funny. And it was only when watching the documentary that I realised it was because she was concerned about how limiting saying we were Asian, even in part, would be, despite having a name Mark, which is very Western. It's a Western Asian family, more so, again, similar to Barty's situation. So, that's relatively late to be realising that was why. It had nothing to do with discrimination, race, or what have you, but she was concerned about what opportunities we wouldn't have by being honest about our nationality. And that's probably the relatability I've got to stigmas of heritage and how that manifests itself in a mixed race context.
How has that affected you, or how did that affect you growing up?
We used to make a bit of light-hearted joke about it, but there was always a bit of a. My mum would be horrified to hear me say that, but you joke about it, but how people say the truest things are said in jest, and you kind of go, well, is there an element? Really, it'd be an absolute lie if I said that I didn't grow up with a lot of Western unconscious biases that still sit with me today, that I have to check myself on a lot more. Again, prior to 2020, I was less aware of them than I am now, significantly aware of them now. Learned a lot over the past couple of years, but I'd say any kind of sort of comment to that effect, if anything, actually, it was a positive impact. This is what I will say. If people ask me where I'm from, generally my answer is heritage or where do I live? And I don't mind the question either. I'm really comfortable with people asking me because I'm quite proud to then say Sri Lankan. And I lead with Sri Lankan because it's the dominant blood heritage, if you like, and also explains my skin colour. So then that's not the next question that follows. But if anything, it's made me more proud of saying, no, this is what I am. Accept it or do one. Didn't swear. And that, to be honest, is part of that's probably the biggest motivator, or was the biggest motivator for me to get involved in the ethnicity employee impact group, was that it became very apparent that a lot of people don't feel like that. And if they are proud, which many are, it's a hidden pride to some degree, or it's pride in certain communities, certainly not pride in the corporate workplace. And I'm a great believer in bring your whole self to work, and I get some criticism for that, but I think on the most part, it's seen as a positive thing. I certainly see it as such. So yeah, if anything, it made more of a point of me wanting to say, no, this is what I am. I probably didn't appreciate how limiting that could have been as, growing up in the late 80s and through the 90s. But ignorance is bliss, as they say.
So I'm really interested in knowing what the others think about this. I don't get offended at that question of where are you from? Maybe because, like yourself, Mark, I grew up in the 80s here. Came to England as a refugee in 1984. And, people can't tell where I'm from by looking at me. So I get it all. I get, the Spanish, the, Turkish, the are you Asian? It's mainly the Asian, are you Pakistani? And I don't get offended by any of it. I actually, when someone says to me, where are you from? The first thing I say is Iran. They're like, no, what part of London? I'm like, oh, sorry. Yeah. So it's a lot like yourself again. I'm very proud of my heritage. I'm very proud of who I am and what my parents had to go through and what we had to go through to get me to where I am today. Jess and Barty, how do you feel about the question? If someone asked you, where are you from? Do you take offence to it?
I think when someone asks me where am I from, I'm like, Birmingham. something actually did happen to me where we were at Glastonbury when Brexit was announced, and it was a very somber day. But we were at Brexit, and I had my eldest, who was a baby at the time, so he was 1.5. I had him in a sling, and we were watching Adele and having a great time. And then somebody walked past and went, like, you can just like beep off right home. And I was like, are they being racist to me? I was like, oh my God, I didn't expect that. And I didn't know how to react to it. And my first response to that was, what, Birmingham? Like, we Brexited, we didn't leave and then I was like, and it wasn't India. So I was like, how are you being racist to me? Where do you think I'm from? And I think like that was the first time in the recent times where I've gone, I'm from Birmingham. And so now I've realised that when everyone asks me where am I from, my instant response is, I'm from Birmingham. And then someone has asked me like, no, where are you from? And I went, well, I'm from Birmingham. Do you mean where my parents are from? Well, however, my mum's from here, my dad's from here. So I think I always think of myself as British. But I did joke to my boys the other day when they're watching the cricket to say, they're watching India versus England. And I went, it's okay, because you can support them both. So, we're covered. It doesn't matter which one wins. But yeah, we did, I kind of joke around with them because they're half Chinese, but they're not from China, they're from Malaysia. So it's really confusing for my boys because it's like, well, we're not from China. Your dad's family are from Malaysia. Your dad was born here. And my family are from India. And so like having this conversation with them, they're like, we have no idea. So where do we visit? I was like, we visit everywhere, but I try to get them to embrace that. But I was very proud of my son when he got really upset at school because he said, we haven't learnt Hinduism. I was like, yes, this is what he's doing. Because my husband doesn't really have a religion. So the boys are Hindu. But I was very proud of that moment where he got really upset about it. Because I was like, I'm impressed that you did that. But luckily our school does do things for like Chinese New Year and for Diwali, so it's very inclusive, and it's nice for them. And I keep saying to them, I want you to embrace it all, being British, being Indian, being Chinese, and one day they might not want to do all of that, but I think it's a good thing, and I think it's good for everyone else to know that actually they are multicultural. So but it's funny because my boys have Indian names. So they have Indian first names and then a Chinese middle name, a proper Chinese middle name, and then obviously we're Lim. And it confuses everybody. And it confuses people when I send them an email and they're like, which one is your name? Like, is it Lim? Is it Barty? Are you a man? Are you a woman? So it's very confusing.
Oh, Barty, you have no idea how I can relate to that. I get called Mr. all the time, hence why I have pronouns. I am an ally, but I also want those pronouns so people know. Going back to, educating our children, absolutely. I think it's all of our responsibility to make sure that the younger generation are educated about all religions, whether you're religious or not. Jess, same question to you. How do you feel about, the question, where are you from?
Same as Mark, actually. I honestly don't mind it. I remember first, when you become aware of that question, people used to go, where are you from? And this would be on my taxi journey into work, and I'd go, oh, Bedford. They're like, no, but where are you originally from? I go, oh, sorry, East London. They're like, no, but where are your parents from? I'm like, okay, so that's a different question. Okay, they're from Punjab. So now, like Mark, when someone says, where are you from? I'm like, what, as in the UK or my parents? And you validate the question. So I honestly don't mind. I think it imparts knowledge to them. I mean, they're asking for a reason. I don't think the reason is always because they're racist and want to kick you out the cab. I think they genuinely are interested, or people are looking for things that are similar. So the amount of taxis I've got into, and people are like, oh, my parents grew up in the Punjab, but that's now Pakistan because India partitioned. And, there's always a story to tell in there. So I think in the most, it comes from a good place. You flip that. I was at the airport last week and I went through passport control. It rejected my passport. So I went to see a person, an actual person. And they were like, where are you from? And I was like, oh, from the UK. They're like, well, where did you come from? I'm like, from Budapest. And they're like, but where are you from? I'm like, from the UK. I have a British passport. And I stood there and I was like, I don't know if he's now getting to a racist angle or he genuinely just wants to know. So you got to balance it, right? There are some of those, but I think in the main, people genuinely want to know because they want to share a story, they want to hear a story. So I don't mind the question at all. And on children, like my nieces and nephews are the same. They'll come home and I think, religious education studies, or whatever they're called today, has moved on so much from when I was at school, where you just learn about what was deemed as the main religions. Now I think each religion is given a platform, to be shared, and stories to be shared and celebrated. So, we're in a different world now. So really don't mind the question.
Amazing. So I think from personal experience, I found myself growing up in a household where it was a bit of a tug of war. You know, I want to be like my friends at school. I went to an all-girls school in Mill Hill. You know, I want to be like them. But at the same time, my parents are telling me I can't be like them. I have to be like this because I'm Iranian and I'm this and I'm that. And growing up, it really genuinely did affect me because I became very rebellious. Against what? I don't know. I would rebel against my English friends who would laugh at me for bringing in Iranian food, for example, if we were on a school trip. But then I would rebel with my, parents at home because they were telling me I can't dress like this, or I can't go to this concert, or I can't listen to this kind of music. And did you have any of that at all growing up in your household?
The only, you asked a rebellion question. The only other thing back around the stigma was, after we spoke, I messaged Mark because I was like, oh my God, I feel like a bit of an idiot now, having shared my story and opened myself up and all of that. And Mark, your response?
Why?
That's literally
Is this not the stigma we're trying to... Like, what you're doing now is exactly what we're trying to break, which is that, doubt, fear, I've overshared.
It's because Asians don't share, right? We just don't share anything. It's funny because my husband's from Bedford. Funny. Luke's mum and dad, when they leave, they all hug and everything else. My parents never really did that. They weren't massive huggers. They've started doing it now, but they weren't massive huggers. And it's so we just, it's very odd. So when Luke's mum hugs me every time, I'm like, and I'm not a hugger, so I'm just like, what do I do? But because my family didn't do that, and it was actually something that was made a point of at my dad's 40th party, that my aunt got up on stage. She's my dad, because my granddad passed away when they were quite young. My dad took over and looked after them all, and she got on the stage and she said, "We never share anything in this family, and we never say anything. We don't give praise, and we never say positive things, and we're all very, proper." And so she kind of made a point of it, and I realised. Then I suddenly noticed that we don't do a lot of things because, it's just not normal, right? Doing those kind of things. And sharing is not normal. You just keep your problems to yourself. And that's part of the problem, isn't it? Is that we don't tell anyone what's going on. Because what will they think? So I think that's probably a good point, actually.
So whereas I found, it's weird because we've got some real... different contrast. So we always do share. We are a family of huggers. We share a lot. And my mum's, I think especially since with my dad not being here, has always kind of gone, follow your heart, do what you want, and always opened up to us and vice versa. But I think maybe this is more personal to me. I think being the eldest and then stepping into that second parent, you don't want to be so vulnerable. So you want to support everyone else. So for me, it was support my mum, support my sister and brothers. They can't see a weakness in me because I've kind of got to lead the way with them now, right? I have to go to uni, I have to do all these things. So if they see any vulnerability in me, oh my God, what would that do to them?
So maybe that's the point, because my dad's the eldest.
Yeah.
I'm the eldest out of my cousins on my dad's side. So maybe this is actually something you're the eldest on one side. Yeah. Maybe this is actually something, is that we all think that we have to do the right thing. Because the hoo-ha, when I said I was going to marry Luke, was like, my uncle phoned me up and went, "You do realise what you're doing? You're opening up the door to everything." And I was like, I'm 31 years old. I'm fully aware of what I'm doing. And he was like, "Well, if you do this, I can't say no to my children if they want to marry out." And I was like, the pressure, and my mum's side, because I'm the youngest, it was, whatever. They weren't happy, but it was very different. But the pressure on my dad's side was very different because I was the oldest, and all my cousins have always looked up to what I've done. And so we've had these conversations. They were like, "Oh, well, we want to be like you. You travel, you put your own property, this kind of stuff." And I never realised that they were watching me the whole time. And once I did realise, I was like, I can't do anything wrong, And so maybe this is actually an issue.
But that goes back to what I was saying about culture clashes, because it's very similar in the Iranian culture where, the cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone gets involved in your life. Everyone gets involved in each other's lives. I don't know so much, maybe Mark, you're raising it might not be similar, but what do you two think, Jess and Barty? Do you find the pressure is quite a lot because you have that extended family looking at you and, you know, how you're going to get on with your life and, you know, expect you to be the role model, as it were?
Yeah, because God forbid my marriage doesn't work out, I'm in trouble. Because that will be it. No one is married. I'm getting married outside. So there's a lot of pressure. Luckily, I'm okay. But yeah, there is like a lot of pressure on that side of things. I think my mum will probably be there ready to say, I told you so. So yeah, there's quite a lot of pressure. You know, even now, I joke about it to Luke, like, you know, this doesn't work out. Oh my God. So yeah, there's... Yeah.
Do you feel that at all, Jess?
I think I do and I don't. So again, eldest in my family, but eldest out of a line of cousins as well. So, but I think I felt it because, again, with my dad not being here, I think I felt the pressure from that angle, as opposed to because I was just the eldest. It was the eldest and I don't have a father figure. I remember doing a project at school about society's view on single parent families, especially when it's the mother raising the family. And it was very much, you know, they go downhill, they don't get educated, they get pregnant before they're married, their life's over, all of that, which in an Asian community is an absolute no-no if anybody's familiar with the culture there, you know. So for me, it was about, I have to, that's the phrase, I have to go to uni, I have to marry in the right religion, I have to do this. And luckily for me, I wanted to go uni. You know, luckily for me, I met a man who is Sikh, and that's all worked out. But there is that pressure. I think it's by default when you're born into a South Asian community. I think there naturally is
expectation.
Yeah, and I think even though your parents are pretty relaxed, because my mum and dad were really relaxed, and my mum even more so after my dad passed away. But I kind of used to look at my mum going, how can you be so relaxed? You know, I was questioning her, going, you know, there's this whole society after you, ready to mock you the minute I'd put my foot out of place. I remember going to get my nose pierced so tentatively, like my mum knew, but I thought, God, nobody else must find out because I'll be the daughter of the woman who lost her husband, single parent family, who went and had a nose pierced. Like, that's the pressure. So there is, but I think it's societal, not my mum, not my immediate family.
Yeah, and I think that's what was my mum's problem, is that what would other people say to her, you know? And luckily my dad was like, well, I don't, you know, he didn't care. So when I told him, he was like, it was to be expected. Yeah. And like, as if he knew that I would just do that. Whereas like my mum, you know, it was only when her friends accepted it and everybody else accepted it, suddenly my mum was okay. I mean, it was almost overnight. You know, one second she was disowning me and the next second she'd approved suddenly that everything was okay. So I think there is a lot of what will other people say that affects everything.
It's fun. The reason why I was smiling and raising my eyebrows is because I was suddenly reflecting on things that I hadn't observed to be a consequence of being a South Asian family or Sri Lankan family. Probably just assumed it was because I was the eldest on one side and not on the other. So I wasn't the one setting the trends effectively and creating the pathway for those that were following, if you like, because my cousins were older. But my mum, who's, you know, ultimately the non-Asian heritage side of my heritage, was the one who cared more. I wouldn't say my dad cared, but my mum was the one who overtly made a point of what, you know, you would hear what would other people think, or she'd make reference to outside influences and be like, why do you care? Why do you care so much? But the pressure thing from my, yeah, I mean, you know, aunts, uncles, they'll look up to you, Mark. This, you know, they look to you while you're doing that. Oh, God, we had, it was my cousin's 30th, just before Christmas, and I was having a drink at the party, and I went outside the front to have a cigarette, and which I only generally do when I'm drinking, and I got a knock on the window from my aunt, who was like, I can't believe you're smoking. And next to her was my 19-year-old cousin, who like plays for Chelsea, like he's a footballer, like as fit as you can be, shaking his head, knowing that he's like, this is going to get to him big time. So there were always, there was, reason why I was raising my eyebrows and sort of smirking is all of a sudden I was realising, okay, this is, maybe it's not just I was the oldest thing, maybe it's a cultural thing, because they would have had similar from, in terms of doing the right thing and probably more take advantage of the things available to you here, because I didn't have those things in Sri Lanka, would have probably been more of the tone from my gran and granddad to my dad and my aunts and uncles. But yeah, that's why I was smiling. Not because I couldn't relate, but more because I was suddenly realising, okay, maybe this is a different reason for this. But yeah, I experienced this similar pressures.
I could literally sit here all day talking to you guys, because there's just so much, and it's a Pandora's box, isn't it? Once you open it, and as Mark said, someone's talking about one thing, and suddenly you piece the puzzle together. You're like, actually, that's why I was like that, or that's why this happened. But unfortunately, we're going to have to bring this podcast to a close. I just want to thank you all for sharing and being so open and honest, and for supporting Computer Centre in educating everyone on South Heritage Month. What's happening next? Is there any events or anything we should be looking out for?
Yeah. The Yammer page is the place to go, to the Ethnicity EIG Yammer page to keep up to date with the events we've got going on. We've got Speak Freely open mic session on the 20th of July, and we've got a number of food experiences that are being planned across Hatfield and Blackfriars in particular. So
I can't wait for the food.
It's the thing that binds us all, right? Everyone needs to eat. So we thought that was a good thing to sort of raise awareness and get people to tap into the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.